In 1955, in a huge pavilion of the world's famous Paris Motor Show, Citroën revealed the car that truly impressed everyone. It looked like an alien ship from the future. This car was at least a decade ahead of its time in design and technology. American, German and Italian representatives of other car companies were confused and envious. This could not be real, they said. Citroën created a masterpiece, a goddess of innovation. Most manufacturers could not even dream of anything like that. And in just a few days during this auto show, Citroën received more than 80,000 orders, and that is on its own already exceeded the annual production capabilities. And at the same time, many magazines burst with articles about this sensational car, and a whole new revolution in the car industry started. 18 years, this is how long the development lasted of this new top secret project from Citroën. The development work did not even stop during the World War II and during the occupation of France. The design papers were hidden from Germans and the work continued in secrecy. But even after the liberation of France, all and any information was hidden, and right before the first road test, one of the car magazine posted a picture of what is so-called mule that looked like a completely different, even from the final product prototypes. Mule cars are usually only created for testing new technology, suspension or engine, for example, but Citroën still sued the magazine for industrial espionage, although it was impossible to learn any technical features from those pictures. After a long 18 years, the car was finally revealed at the Paris Motor Show, and many could not believe it was a real production car. The abbreviation DS stands for Désiré Spéciale, and what was so special, of course, is the fantastic, unusual appearance, radically different teardrop-shaped design made by Flaminio Bertoni, not to confuse him with Giovanni Bertoni, who was another Italian designer and Bertoni Group founder. So he started working on the shape of the DS back in 1938, initially as a restyling of the Traction Avant replacement. And even before the outbreak of the World War II, Citroën's management told Bertoni that the goal was no longer the restyling or modernization of the new Traction Avant, but the creation of a completely new VGD car that was the code name of the future DS. The first concept car was too big, almost 6 meters. It was too long for a standard French garage of that time, and Bertoni shortened the concept by about a meter, reducing the rear overhang, getting closer to the idea of having the wheels as close as possible to the four corners of the car body. The teardrop shape gave the car record low aerodynamic drag coefficient. In addition to that, the designers managed to abandon massive radiator grille. Now the airflow to the radiator went from under the bumper, and the radiator itself was placed far inside the engine bay. Another important feature was the unibody frame design with the rear panels that almost completely covered the rear wheels and were easily removable in the event of changing a rear wheel. Those who saw DS for the first time were surprised when the car demonstrated all the capabilities of the hydraulic suspension. Clearance could be adjusted from 65 mm to 250 mm, which was unimaginable even for an off-road vehicle. The engineers of that time assumed that the post-war European roads will not be at their best, and this car was complete and ready for that, and in the same time hydraulic air suspension on independent levers gave incredible softness and comfort of movement on the imperfections of any road. Driver could choose ground clearance level, and it was automatically maintained for any vehicle load, but when the engine was off, Citroën DS was always at the lowest position when parked, and it looked incredibly stylish. The car was not even equipped with a tire changing jack, so in order to change the wheel, It was enough to remove the side panel, lift the hydraulic suspension and place it in the highest position, and then place a special stand under the rear suspension, and then lower the suspension in order for a wheel to stay in the air. So essentially, if needed, DS could roll on 3 wheels only, which was repeatedly demonstrated for advertising purposes. This complicated hydraulic suspension was powered by a pump that in turn was powered by the engine. The same pump was responsible for powering braking system, steering, and automatic clutch system. The clutch pedal itself was simply not needed to switch gears. The system was very different from everything that existed before, so it needed a driver to get some time to get used to. The transmission unit positioned in front of the engine, right on top of the front axle. That's why the engine itself was almost inside of the car. That has actually helped with balancing out the car itself. And the engine was the least interesting part. Initially, it was a basic 1.9 liter 4-cylinder engine producing 75 horsepower, and it was able to accelerate DS to 145 kilometers an hour. That is about 90 miles an hour, which was not a lot even for 1955, but later there were much more powerful versions of the engine. The most notable was the engine was 144 horsepower. Taking into account the low weight of the car, it could accelerate the car up to 188 kilometers an hour, that is 116 miles per hour. But the main idea of Citroën wasn't the speed or sportness. The designers wanted a car that looked just as unusual as the spectacular engineering behind it. That's why they added elements such as frameless side windows, original one-spoke steering wheel, flat floor in the inside, the rear lights on the pillars after the restyling, and in addition to that, the headlights turned in the direction with the front wheels. And just to mention again, this new design was incredibly bold and original, as it was still 1955 when almost every car in Europe was old technologically and aesthetically. The appearance of DS became a huge cultural event in the post-war Europe, and one of the most famous actresses, Gina Lollobrigida, advertised the car on the front page of a popular magazine. Philosopher Roland Barthes devoted to this car a whole chapter in his philosophical collection. At the Milan Design Exhibition, the car was presented as a rocket, symbolizing superiority of technology. Multiple times it was featured on top magazines and newspapers, and not only ordinary people could own one, but also the most famous people, actors and musicians and models and politicians had one. It was not only a symbol of style but also a status admired by everyone. The abbreviation DS in French sounded like goddess, and this was the car's public nickname. But not everything was so rosy and perfect at first. The first batch of cars was not very reliable. The hydraulic system often leaked, so were the brakes, power steering and suspension. And almost all the parts were tied to a hydraulic system itself, so when it breaks, it makes simple driving almost impossible. Also, initially, mechanics in service centers were poorly trained and did not know how system worked and how to fix it until Citroën supplied the service stations with service manuals and organized training, quickly fixing the problems, so the owners finally received the goddess they were waiting for. One of the most famous owners of Citroën was the President Charles de Gaulle, who loved his car, especially since DS saved his life during one of the public trips. The assassination attempt was planned by a group of armed men. They shot his DS, punching wheels, but the driver used a hydraulic suspension to raise the car and to ensure constant ground clearance, so the president was quickly taken to a safe location. DS became a winner of many rallies and marathons, even the most difficult rally of all the time, Rally Monte Carlo, also London-Sydney Marathon in 1968, when after 11,000 kilometers of a distance, when only 240 kilometers left to the finish, a head-on collision happened with another car and everyone walked out alive, but such a valuable victory was missed. And beside the sedan, Citroën produced a convertible model in small numbers, also a coupe and a wagon, and even a presidential limousine on special order. But there was another car which was more suitable for the role of a Batman car. It is called Michelin PLR. It was 7 meters in long and 2.5 meters wide, with a curb weight of 9 tons. This car was created by Michelin Tire Company to speed test truck tires, and it had 10 car wheels and 11 truck wheel for testing that was placed inside in the middle of the car body. This monster was built to a great extent on DS units, but the engines were in form of two 5.7-liter Chevy V8 engines. One powered the rear wheels and another powered the testing wheel. Citroën DS featured a number of movies. Many are comedies with legendary Louis de Funès, where the characters get into funny, absurd situations. Many action movies as well. This car was the most famous personal vehicle of Fantomas, who was the original French Dr. Evil. His car had fake engines, jet engines, and it could fly. DS appeared in other remarkable movies, and it seemed like some of them were successful and memorable just because this car was featured in them, and vice versa. And the beauty itself, the look of this car was just like another French movie character. So DS was created during the hardest times, but it was exceptional. It was built without looking at competitors, because there were no competitors and nothing even close. So DS engineers and designers were not limited in their work by cost or marketing, but they themselves decided how a modern car should look like, and that is how they created a real symbol, a car that would ideally identify itself with France and the design and technology itself. That's all I have for you today, guys. Check out my channel for my other videos, but for now, thanks for watching and see you in the next one.